Jehoshaphat! It's the Retro Adventurers. Yes, it's us. Today we'll be exploring the dubious delights of Darkon and experiencing the extended adventures of Elijah Bailey in a game from Asimov's Robots series. I'm Ben Collier, and with me today are Jason Compton, the doyen of the Retroistas, and with him, a man named Velociraptor, Dave Velociraptor. Jason, should we do it this way? Would you like to introduce Dave for us?
Sure. Dave Velociraptor comes from the This Week in Retro podcast, which those of you who've been following the show for a while may remember as, and he's got a cat with him, which you may be able to hear. This Week in Retro is one of the first podcasts to sort of take notice of us when we launched. And as of pretty recently, I have become a weekly member of the hosting rotation. So, Dave, thanks for coming on the show with us.
Fantastic. Welcome.
Delight.
Really, really good to have you with us. Right. So sometimes we do a mailbag. Other times we don't do a mailbag. Today we're not going to do a mailbag because we have a lot to talk about. There is a lot. These games go deep. So
since we have Dave on for the first time, how about we hear a little bit about Dave's connection to text adventures?
That's a great idea. Dave, tell us all about it.
So, I would say the first text adventures I played were fighting fantasy novels, which are not based on a computer. Mm-hmm. They quickly followed the choose your own adventure novels, and fighting fantasy were a UK phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I believe they did make it to the US, but nothing like as popular as they were in the start of the 80s. Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson made them. They started making them, at least other people carried the torch. And they were text adventures with rudimentary role-playing games in the form of a book, and you ended up with your hand in very different positions as you made choices like you would do in a text adventure. And of course, as soon as I got the opportunity to play text adventures on a computer, my Amstrad CPC, I loved it. I absolutely loved exploring things. The first one I played extensively was The Lord of the Rings Part 1, which is the follow-up to The Hobbit from Beam or Melbourne Software. And I loved exploring that. It has extra stuff that's not in the novels that kind of fits the vibe of the novels. Mm-hmm. You can go to Hobbiton and so on, and you can meet Radagast, things that aren't in the books. It's absolutely fantastic. I love that. And ever since that, I've been into text adventures. I tended to follow the way that computers developed. So from text adventures, I played point and click adventures, but I went back to text adventures afterwards. Once I think that point and click had kind of faded away in the 90s, I went back to text adventures, and I've always loved them. But the most time I've spent on text adventures has been online in MUDs. I spent a huge amount of time on them.
Which was your MUD of choice?
Duris.
Oh, interesting. So you and I, we're quite similar chaps, actually. Both of us are CPC originally, although I have a deep and abiding love for the BBC.
I technically had the BBC first.
Yeah.
My mum borrowed it from the school over the summer. And for those few weeks, it was clear to my parents that you need a computer, so we'll get you one for Christmas.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk more about the CPC when we get on to Souls of Darkon, actually. But and then the MUDs. So you were saying Duras, was it? Mm-hmm. I was among many others. I wasted a lot of my life on Threshold, right. And we've been talking for some time about having a MUD episode. So maybe if we do that, it would be lovely to have you back to join us in exploring some of the MUDs that are still out there. It's great stuff. It's fantastic. Just out of interest, what did you move on to after the CPC?
So I moved on to the Atari ST.
Oh, the same. I was deeply disappointed with the ST. Deeply disappointed.
What I didn't like about the ST was the user interface was very basic, and really all I did was put a game in and play the game. I'd fiddle around with cover discs, but I felt as if GEM, the graphical environment manager for the Atari ST, was quite basic compared to a text interface. And when I moved on to a PC afterwards, I'm sure you did the same.
Yeah, same.
When I moved on to a PC afterwards, it was great to finally get back to the nuts and bolts of things.
As a programmer, I'd been writing games on the CPC and landed on the ST, and it was just a disaster. Anyway,
I loved my time on the ST though. I mean, the first game the game I really wanted to play in the ST was Dungeon Master, and I had a fantastic time on that, and Captive and all sorts of other games on it. So it's not as if I had a bad time on the ST, and I was never a programmer. But the difference between suddenly taking that command line away, and I have found out recently that what we had on the ST wasn't really what the ST was. That was half of the operating system, and you were putting the rest of the operating system in from disk with all the extensions and so on that.
That's right.
But nobody did that. They just stuck the next game in and turned it on.
Yeah. Without much further ado, I think we need to move on to Souls of Darkon. So, just spoken about the CPC. Dave, I assume you played this on the CPC?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, I didn't realise, I've got a story. I didn't realise that this had been released for the CPC. I didn't know anything about it until I loaded it on the Spectrum for this episode. And I loaded it up and I thought, oh my goodness. Because when I first got a CPC, I went to a computer shop and I was shown the computer and I was told, sit here, your mother's going to go off and do some shopping. And when she comes back, you can tell us whether you want the computer. And so I was left in the shop with this gentleman. And he then went and had an epileptic fit, actually. It was quite terrifying. And I had to run to the fire station and get him all this sort of stuff. But on that CPC, which was a second-hand machine that I then took home, the first game I put in was just on a cassette, and it came with it. There was a load of games that came with it. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what it was called. I put it in, and it was this adventure game that I found incredibly difficult to play. And years later, I thought, I wonder what that game is. What was it? And now I know it's Souls of Darkon. So
changing lives and sparking long-suppressed memories of traumatic experiences. That's what we're doing here on the Retro
I'm
Adventures.
Getting PTSD. The bloke is falling over. It's Souls of Darkon, and so as soon as I saw it, I was on the ZX Spectrum. I thought, well, I know this is on the CPC. I hadn't seen it on the, on IFDB and all that. I hadn't seen that it was available. I said, I know it. I know it's on the CPC. Went and got it, stuck it into the retro virtual machine on the 6128, and played it on there. So, Dave, how did you emulate it?
Yes, I did. Right. I did buy a copy of it.
You're joking.
I now have a copy of it. Yep, I now have a copy in the house.
Really?
And there is very little to it's a clamshell one with a tape, and it really is just an inlay. There's no novella, there's nothing like that to set the scene for it, unfortunately.
Well, that was it. I thought, well, this surely, having experienced playing it now, I there must be more to the instructions, because there's a load of stuff in here that seems to require instructions. Jason, you're I'm assuming you've had this same experience, right? This game is a little more complicated than it would seem from the instructions.
Well, it's so opaque that I don't even remember how this made it onto the schedule. Like I've done a little searching of Discord exchanges. I don't even remember how we selected this game. So yes, there's a couple of different tape releases out there. Bug Bite release, IFDB credits Andy Walker, but there's no sign of his name anywhere in the game itself. As you guys have been saying, very basic tape inlay, just a little bit of flavor text. Doesn't really tell you anything about the adventure. What I will say is that it's pretty good early on in at least telling you, hey, there's a vocab command so you can get an on-screen view of everything that you'll need for the game. That I thought was helpful. It was released for C64, Spectrum as mentioned, and CPC as mentioned. I had seen somewhere in researching the game mentioned that basically each version has, some crippling flaw or other, but it's different in each version. So we can talk about.
I found one in the CPC. I'm pretty sure that's. There's some interesting stuff.
Yeah, on the 64, one of the very first puzzles, there's a missing piece of description that you would have no idea what to do unless you have the walkthrough. It is a text adventure game with graphics. There are kind of monochrome bitmaps for most, if not all areas. They got a little samey for me, but I will say that for a single load, they were making an effort. They're okay. Modified font, which, I would rather have more content than a changed, typeface for the game, but I'll give him credit. Like he did try to pack quite a bit into this game. Ben, would you like to do the flavor text reveal, or shall I?
Flavor text. Well, I tell you what. What I can do is I can certainly read the elevator pitch for this game.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
There we go. So here we go. It says Megron, where science and sorcery are used to awesome effect. The obsession for power has released the evil of, full caps, Darkon. Only you and computer, spelt K and then an A at the end, can free the people. A sci-fi fantasy with magical graphics, I was pushing it, and from beyond the sun of Krenal. You have landed on Megron, and your faithful robotic friend hovers nearby. The air is fresh, and things seem normal. Long gone is the Grand Council of Megron. Their power and knowledge, which combines science and sorcery, has been amassed by the Evil One, Darkon. Your task is to find him and destroy him. All you have is your ability to learn and your technical know-how. And that's about right.
Yeah, and there's a podcast that I listened to called The Ted Dabney Experience, and a phrase that I got from them is imagination gap. Now, I don't know if they coined that phrase, but the imagination gap, it keeps coming up for me talking about old games, and it's the gap between what the actual game is and what the game hopes to be that your imagination fills in. And this game leans very heavily on the imagination gap, and that blurb really sets if I was playing this at the age of 10, my 10-year-old mind would be creating all this backstory that doesn't really exist to the benefit of the game.
And when my 10-year-old, I think it was 11 actually, my 11-year-old mind, when I put this tape in, and it was in a blank jewel case with no inlay, if that makes sense. So I had nothing to go on, and so I was just very, very confused by it. To be honest, I had no idea. I think I made it to the. You remember the monument? I made it to the monument, and it was the monument that made me realize that it was this game. But I remember the robot and I remember the monument, but I didn't get far. I really didn't get far. Didn't know what I was doing. I'd played text adventures before.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far I would get if it was just me and the game and no external help.
Yeah. I mean, I was very quickly in the land of the what do we call it? Do we call it the shameful playthrough? The shameful walkthrough, the shameful solution.
Not I, sir. I have no shame whatsoever using the modern tools available to us from our friends at solutionarchive.com and others.
I did find one that gave you little hints and said about seeing in the dark, for example. And it did that before it spoiled the rest. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough for me.
Well, that was one of the most left field puzzles in the game, because I don't think there was anything done in World to establish that you should be able to do that. No. Was there?
You needed to. There was. I looked online, and there was a gentleman who talked about solving this without any help, and he figured out that particular clue by having his friend decompile the game.
Sure, which is not uncommon for some of these old adventures, with which, as Dave put it, the imagination gap. And what's odd about it, so this is some things that set this game apart. Like I said, it's a single load, but it does have these bitmap graphics for each site. It's got the vocab command, so you can at least kind of check, okay, what might I be able to do? You see zap, like, okay, I guess that's going to be a thing that we do in this game. Another thing that it has is the command legend, which at first I thought was going to mean like an on-screen map, but actually means like, is there a legend associated with this location that I'm in? And that was a nice bit of way to get more flavor out of the world, more.
I liked it.
that imagination.
Legends, I thought, was one of the things that sets this game aside from other ones.
Yeah.
If you imagine you're playing a game where you're at this place where there are loads of legends, there's a backstory you've maybe read and forgotten, and typing legends will give you the pertinent information about the place where you are, which of course leads to prompting you with clues as to what you might want to achieve or the difficulties you have here. The basic idea of legends, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah, the idea of it was solid. Some of the mechanical quirks of it, because we see this in a number of these games where the room description is fixed at the top of the screen, and then there will be more information that appears later, and that's dynamic. So the way that works out in this game is you enter a location, you get the description at the top, but then you need to type "look" again, and then that will tell you things like, are there items in the area? And that was odd. Kind of the search carefully equivalent for this game. And unfortunately, it does the thing where some objects are only shown in the bitmaps. Like, for example, there's a robot that gets dismantled, and then you have to examine arm, but then you can see, it's been dismantled. There's a bitmap arm sitting there. But if you're not willing to say, well, it's not described in the top text, it's not described when I look, but maybe I'll try examining that arm. That's the only way you're going to get that information out of it. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think that was what banjaxed me back when I was 11. I don't even think I realized that you could type "look" and realize and get the various locations and directions and so forth. I knew that I'd played Twinkling Valley at that point. I'd played various BBC adventures, but this was something different, and I knew to go north, south, east, west, and I knew how to examine and take and all those sorts of things. But this caught me out, and I just didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it was one of the things I noticed about this game, and obviously I was playing it with a view to speaking to the world about it. So I made some notes about the kind of the three different parts to the screen. The top, almost like a banner across the top of the screen, is the set description for the room. And then the rest of the screen is split, at least in the CPC version. I assume it's the same in the C64 version. Yep. The left-hand screen is the drawn graphic, and then the right hand is the text input window. And I like the basic idea of keeping the fixed stuff at the top and looking to see the things that might change. But why are the exits in Look? Why are the exits not up the top? Because they don't change, but they shouldn't change. Yeah,
I guess maybe they thought, well, if you look, we'll say it. So maybe they thought it was duplicating what was going on. It's odd, isn't it? I'm interested. Did either of you find yourselves in Grimoire's lair?
No,
probably. Who was at home?
So Grimoire,
Grimoire himself.
Okay, so here we are. You're
still in the same game.
You're stone drunk, and you find yourself in Grimoire's lair.
Oh, was that when you drink I drank too many times and then I got thrown in jail and then I restarted. Was that the...
in jail? Oh, right.
Well, maybe that's what I...
Maybe that's... So, yes, skins of all sizes decorate the inside. Grimoire looks up from his greasy cauldron. Before you can react, you are skinned and boiled.
Oh, no, I missed that one.
You fail to satisfy his gluttony. And that's if you drink from the barrel of mead 3 times. I mean, you can tell it's warning you. And everyone knows that you don't drink too much alcohol in adventure games. Something bad will always happen, but that means you sort of have to do it just to find out what'll happen. In my book, It's a bit like kissing any female character.
Don't spoil Robots of Dawn, Ben.
Oh, lovely!
It's a nice little touch. I like hidden little things like that. Yeah,
it's good, and it's bizarre because it's probably the best graphics in the entire game. Are the graphics for Grimoire's lair? They're not, they're not explicitly unpleasant, but they are. There's this character, no, it looks great, and that's like I say, probably the best room description and room picture I thought in the entire game.
I did want to say that this is a single load tape game, which means that unlike the disc games that we'll see, which have much more breadth of description because they have the ability to do so, this is quite restricted in memory. And what they've achieved managing to get graphics along with the text is pretty good. but unfortunately it still makes the descriptions not what I'd like to have read. I wanted to know more about this place. I wanted to know more about Darkon and so on, and we got enough glimpses to get the imagination gap, if I throw that phrase out again, going for a 10 or 11-year-old. But for us playing this now, I think it was a bit too obvious for me that we were only scratching at the surface and there was nothing beyond it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. And now about the sort of, what's the word for it, I suppose, the internal logic of the game. Some of it was a bit peculiar.
Good example.
Oh, come on then. Give us an example.
Give axe to woodsman. The woodsman thanks you for the axe and lends you the anti-gravity belt.
Yes, that's right. I've got it written down here. Exactly the same thing. Carry on.
That's it, and that's it. I thought that was enough.
Oh, that is weird enough.
Another one was the guard recognises the ring. Why does he recognise the ring that I got up the tree? Why?
Well, I had another reason for being like freaked out by the belt. You use the belt, and then instead of just leaving
running out of charge or something,
it says the woodsman recalls his belt, and it zips off, it flies off into the sky and vanishes. I mean, it's a pretty unimaginative way to get rid of an item that I suppose would break all sorts of other puzzles later in the game.
It's a very imaginative way to get out of it when they could just said it's now run out of charge.
Recharge, right?
Yeah. Why would you recall it?
I suppose there was like, but then we have to leave it on, and then we've got an extra item on the I don't know. It's bizarre.
I know there are plenty of items that have no use. So I can't imagine that it was. I think just that was what struck his imagination. It's a very punishing game, especially once you get to the latter half. There's a lot of either there's a single move that's the correct one, or you're done for, which was a shame in a setting where you've been encouraged to ask for legend and stuff like that. So maybe legend will give me help in defeating the big foozle. It's like, nope, because unless you do these steps exactly in this exact order, and that's a shame. And I feel like there have been games, like some Infocom games that have some big showdowns at the end. You can use a few turns to examine, to kind of think about, okay, well, is it going to be this? Is it going to be this? So the big kind of move dependent showdowns here are very, very punishing. In the modern era, we have snapshots. We can just roll back in time. I admit, I almost never am going to have patience to test the save load system in a tape game. I'm just not. So I believe it offered it, but did it work? It's very hard to tell. Talk about those game-breaking bugs. Yeah, one of the very first things, the fact that there's a piece of metal on the statue in the first room that you need to pull that's not described on the 64, and I believe that each version has some weird glitch that would keep you from making progress. So that's real unfortunate. As far as like the author's imagination, unfortunately, it was sometimes tripped up by some typo syntax issues. There was some its versus its. Droid got spelled Driad at one point. And if you follow us on Facebook or Blue Sky, you can see when I did a shout out to the intricate cravings that decorated the altar, which definitely puts a different spin on how it's been decorated. Did you guys think that it was reasonable that the crystal fountain needed more crystal? That kind of took me by surprise.
The crystal itself, pick up the crystal, oh no, it's gone, game over, restart. Although it doesn't tell you if you're walking dead. Yeah. I didn't like that, but then that was par for the course with these things. Yeah. The idea was that you took multiple attempts to do it until you could, almost like a musical performance where you hit every note along the way. But sorry, that wasn't the question you asked.
That's okay.
I didn't think it was any more weird than the other things in it.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, there are plenty of them. The one that caught me was the sort of that you're in that room and it's got a sort of snake.
Serpent.
Snake thing. Serpent, and you feel around and you realise that it's kind of loose, and I think you push its mouth, and then
the carving, yeah.
And then it locks open.
Yeah.
And then you have to go in. But it's peculiar because in the picture it doesn't look like it's large enough for a person to crawl in, is it?
Right.
Yes, it's about the size of like a small person's head. It's completely odd.
And under-described exits and entrances was a persistent issue in this game.
I have to confess that I struggled for a long time before I was able to enter the 2 shops in the game before I figured out that open door was necessary before I could go in. I struggled with the syntax for a long time before that happened. To my shame, I guess. I don't know if it should have been more obvious or if that was just me being wrong.
I think the syntax was it was just peculiar. But so I guess we get on to, as a result of this, we get on to the big one. The big one. So we know there's a scan command, right? Because we've typed vocab and we can see that you can scan, which is great because it seems like you can scan the area. Maybe it's like a search command, Maybe it's like scan the area or something. And that's all we know. And then in one room, it's dark. And we can only see if we
scan infrared.
Because obviously.
Yeah. And to me, scan, up to that point, scan had functioned as examine.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a synonym for that.
Yeah, same. Very, very peculiar. And this is the one we spoke earlier about, the chap who had his friend decompile a game.
Yeah.
This is the one. Because there's no way you'd have to be a sort of omniscient to be able to figure out this puzzle.
I used to have a device for my CPC called a Multiface 2.
I've heard it. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And you could pause the CPC and you could read through memory. And I would have been able to do this, and I would be able to have found infrared, and then perhaps I could have worked it out. But there was no way other than with this. And we talk about the shame of using solutions or not the shame of using solutions. And
not me.
Every time you come across something like this, it says to you, well, it puts doubt on you. Next time you're battling against a problem, you're thinking, is this going to be scan infrared?
Yeah.
Am I doing myself an injustice here by spending 45 minutes and closing it for today and going back tomorrow? Yeah. Is it going to be something I'm never going to be able to solve, or am I going to finally solve it and get that sense of that wonderful sense of closure when you do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anybody's curious, the Commodore 64 equivalent of that were things like the Action Replay cartridge, where you can freeze and do in-memory investigation. And, in some games that's harder than others because, some have the plain text exposed in memory, but others, especially, the clever, single-load developers, they were doing, in-memory compression to store more things in there. So you'd really have to start pulling it, really disassembling it, or at least, figuring out what that encoding is to start pulling that apart. So are we kind of at the wrapping up on the souls of Darkon? The souls do, in fact, play a role in the end game.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and it's very... it's almost like something from... Oh, what was his name? Elric. It's like something from Elric, isn't it? I don't know if you're familiar with Elric's sword that's sort of in the Michael Moorcock books. Anyone who has read that will understand what I'm talking about. But that's the general gist of it, as far as I can get.
So, Ben, you talked about playing this as a child, as one of the first CPC games you played. And like you, there are games that I played when I was a child that I intend to come back to. Some of the Mastertronic combination text and graphic adventures, similar to this, for example, I want to go back to. I feel there's unfinished business there. How did you feel? Did this do anything for you in that regard?
Well, it was a bit of a wow, because I'd looked everywhere for this. It was just such a peculiar thing, and what annoyed me about it was that I just didn't know what the hell it was. That was what got me, and discovering it was a bit of a wow moment. I mean, the one that for me is going to be Closure, and I'd like to do it at some point. We've obviously done the Pawn in our first episode, but I'd like to go back to Guild of Thieves. A friend of mine had an ST before I did. He had Guild of Thieves, and I think we were killed on the third third screen, the master thief or whatever he is, who knows how to kill in 1,000 ways, and he quickly dispatches you if you muck about with him. I'd like to go back and play that through and actually beat it. I think that would give me a great sense of closure. This one, I'm happy enough just knowing what the hell it was.
Yeah. Well, and that the other tie back to episode 1 was that what the appetizer game we did for that was Around the World, which was my first experience with a text adventure. And it took me a long time to figure out just what that game was, because it's a tricky term to search for. It wasn't a high profile release. So even though we kind of backed into it and we don't even remember how we got it on the schedule, glad that Souls of Darkon can tick that box for you as well.
Well, I think it was fate. It was fate, Jason.
It has to be. It has to be.
The universe drew it to me so that I could have that sense of relief.
Just all of these changes that you've set in motion in the universe by innocently saying, "Why don't we do a text adventure podcast?" I'd like a bit of podcast.
We truly shape our own reality, don't we?
So yeah, the souls do play a role in the resolution of the game. And so something that I want to highlight in this game, because I have chided it and I'm about to chide it again later in this episode. I've chided games that are afraid of being earnest about the story that they're telling. And Souls of Darkon is not that. Like, yes, there's probably some gap where maybe the publisher said, "Hey kid, we're not putting all this stuff in here about how your computer has infrared scanners. Forget it. We haven't budgeted for that." Whatever went wrong there. But it's earnest about the story that is set in, one of those sci-fi apocalypse. So we have anti-grav and we have, old-timey blacksmiths. It's consistent about that. The souls pay off at the end. So although, no, it's not a great game, I don't even think it's a good game, but I do want to highlight, hey, he had his story and he told it with conviction, with earnestness. And there are plenty of games that were bigger budget and better remembered that didn't. And I think Souls of Darkon at least deserves some acknowledgement for that.
It's the descriptions, the words used, the setting are very evocative. I wanted this to be good. I really did want to come into this and explore a new world. And you would have to rely on your imagination, Cap. Here I go again. You have to rely on your imagination to explore that world, because it's sadly not in the game.
It's always unpleasant to sort of to slate a game. Yeah, I think if I'd had the cover, I'd had the preamble as an 11-year-old. Yeah, I think I would have bought into it a bit more. As it stood, 11-year-old me would have told you this game was a bust. 47 on Tuesday, me will tell you the game's a bit of a bust. But I mean, 10 marks for setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, if you want to experience that for yourselves, it's available on the CPC, ZX Spectrum, and C64. Go and see if you can get drunk and end up being boiled and skinned. Right, on to the next one.
Typical birthday Tuesday.
So, Robots of Dawn. Where on earth do we start with this? Okay.
Well, how about we do the speeds and feeds bit, and then we can talk about the rich history of Isaac Asimov and his take on robots and society.
Do you want to do the honors, Jason? Tell us all about it. Come on.
You have 3 minutes.
So, this is a release from Epyx, which is best known in its early days for being called Automated Simulations, at which point they had war games and RPGs like Sword of Fargol and Temple of Apshai, and then later evolved into a company that was best known for multi-event sports games like Summer Games and World Games and so forth, and they basically defined that category for the 80s. This is the only text adventure that they released. It's designed by Jon Leupp. It just says it is based on the science fiction thriller by Isaac Asimov. We've talked when we've done other adaptations, how much is the author actually involved? We've had Ron Martinez on. He was working with a living author on that. Obviously, when we did Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle was long gone. But this was based on the very recently released Robots of Dawn novel. Leupp has a lot of other industry credits across genres. He did the Sword of Saros RPG for the Star Path tape loading expander for the Atari 2600. So that's that's a deep cut there. So unusual game for him, unusual game for Epyx, and I really want to find out more about just how this came to be. But it did in fact follow closely on the heels of the novel release Robots of Dawn, which I believe came out in 83. This game came out in 84, only for Commodore 64 and Apple II, which is a little unusual. It's surprising to not see either or both of a DOS release or an Atari 8-bit release. You know, if you've got a 6502 code base, you kind of figure, even though the Atari was kind of declining at that point, you often will see an Atari release. DOS, was a growing market, and obviously, an early DOS machine is great for text adventures. Neither of those happens. But I played the 64 version. Which did you guys play?
I was on the Apple II version.
You went back to the Apple. Your enemy, your ally. I predicted you would not attempt it again after GFS Sorcerers.
I know. I didn't realize, actually, I have to say, I didn't realize it was available on other formats. If you go to IFDB for this, the description is remarkably sparse.
Yeah.
It's one of the ones where there's not much there. And I thought, well, this seems to be a bit of a dark horse release. There's a link to Apple on here. It was there. It worked.
Okay.
So... And I was used to the various foibles of the Apple, so type carefully. And that was me. I mean, Jason, what did you play it on? C64?
Yeah, I played the Commodore 64 version. Right. So you played Apple. Dave, what did you play?
I played the Apple version as well. I used Micromate to emulate it. I played the Apple version. I changed it to a lovely amber display. And I struggled with the lack of the backspace key and having to use the cursor to go back and
welcome to my world.
I won't struggle for a short while. Once you get used to it, it's okay.
Just type twice as slowly.
But there is something I wanted to bring up in relation to what Jason said before it gets too late to say it, and that's I was very surprised at when the novel was released in relation to the game. In my mind, Isaac Asimov wrote books in the 50s and 60s and then wrote a few more in the 70s. The reality is he wrote books all the way through to about this point. This is when he stopped. I assumed this was made 20 years later.
I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Now is probably the time. Now is the time to discuss this. Jason,
Ben,
you've listened to the audiobook of the book this is based on.
I listened to the audiobook, yes.
I've read the book. Dave, have you read? Have you by any chance read the book? I mean, it's certainly not a sort of mandatory item here. Are you familiar with it at all?
I am 46% of the way through the audiobook.
Okay,
and I would suggest that if you're going to play this game, you need to listen to at least the start of the audiobook to get the exposition that is required.
Yeah. Okay, so having said that, if you were going to write a text adventure and sell it to children, would you base it on the premise of Robots of Dawn?
Why do you ask that, Ben?
Only under the assumption that Isaac Asimov, the famous author from 20 years ago, has written a new book. Can we turn that into money?
Yeah.
That's why this one was chosen, I'm sure, because it was recent.
And then it gets given to the programmer who reads the book and realizes that he is going to be thrown in jail if he writes a text adventure featuring the plot line of Robots of Dawn. Right. So let's put this in perspective. It's 1983-ish, 86, 83. Asimov writes Robots of Dawn at the same time. It's around about the same time as as Foundation and Earth.
Yeah,
both of those books. Asimov. It seems to be the case that by this point, Asimov has sort of. It's probably best say. And what I'm going to do right now is because I told Jason I was going to do this earlier, and I'm going to now give this warning. Gentle listener, if you like to listen to this in the car with your children, or with anyone who might be offended by anything a bit on the fruity side, I would perhaps take this and listen to the rest of this on your own. Okay, so
are you overselling it?
By the early 80s,
you may not have gotten to the point of the book that Ben is about to get grown about.
Okay.
By the early 80s, both those books, Foundation and Earth and Robots of Dawn, I think it's probably best put that Isaac Asimov seems to have turned into a bit of a dirty old man.
Spoiler alert, he was always a dirty old man.
It's just the particularly febrile atmosphere of this 1970s followed by the early 80s made it acceptable to put it into print. So this is a lot of this sort of thing in all sorts of literature in the early 80s. There's a science fiction book called Semiotext SF, which is Dave's just spilled everything everywhere.
Spill.
It was me.
Dave's. While Dave clears up the mess, I'll carry on with the exposition. So there was this book, Semiotext SF. It's grotty, and and it was by a company called Autonomous Media. They were producing stuff like this. They produced a compilation called I think it was called something like Semiotext Kids or something. And they'd got children to write it, but the content was so revolting that it was actually I think it was impounded by the U.S. Senate. I think it's the only book ever to have been forcibly impounded by order of the U.S. Senate. And I'm going to go off out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that Robots of Dawn ought to have been impounded. I think it's a grotty book, and it's got all sorts of exciting science fiction ideas in it, which. It went from the first 3 chapters. You're on a space station. You're off. You're going on and then all of a sudden it goes from 0 to 60, and you're in this environment. How would you describe it, Jason?
So yes, the world that Robots of Dawn is set on is we are made to understand is one of free love, in which one may, quote, offer themselves to anybody else at any time. And you're reading between the lines, it is generally understood that the correct answer is yes. Like, anybody can say no, but we get enough context to know that you're really supposed to say yes, even if the offerer is, let's say, your own biological daughter, who says like, well, we weren't that close, really. So that's a plot point that makes Ben groan and certainly raised my eyebrow. And go ahead.
I did get to the point you're talking about then, because I'm aware of that bit in it. Yeah, so
okay.
I share your alarm at that part of it.
Yeah, and that character is Vasilia, who does appear in the game. Her father, Dr. Fastolf, sort of appears in the game. That is a point of discussion that we'll get to. Another character, Gladia, apparently was in an earlier book. Had you guys read the earlier books in the Robot series, by the way?
No, if I had, I don't remember.
Yeah, I've read a lot of the stuff. I've read a lot of it. I'm a big Asimov fan. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of his kind of later stuff being, like I say, having a bit of the old, a bit of the fruit about it. But I mean, I love the way you said Gladia just then. It sounded like Zap Brannigan.
Anyway, so Gladia features in an earlier book, which I have not read. There's a lot of callbacks to that one, which I don't have the title handy. There's a lot of callbacks to iRobot and Susan, generally. And Gladia has been brought to this world from her point of origin, which was a world in which sex was, very much not a thing, and almost nobody ever has it. And she was very cold and frigid, and she explains in rather blunt terms to our would-be hero Elijah Bailey, the Earth's greatest detective, about how she has attempted all forms of love and self-love, and just nothing ever worked for her. Until she meets our Giscard, who is a robot that has been, mind melted, your brain warped by means unknown. That is the murder mystery plot of Robots of Dawn, the novel.
And I think,
oh no, wait! I'm sorry. I said Giscard. No. It's Jinder. Jinder is the Yes. I'm sorry.
Positronic robot.
Again, if anyone who's familiar with Star Trek, The Next Generation, will at this point be wondering whether a particular subplot involving Tasha Yar from The Naked Now may indeed have been influenced by Robots of Dawn, the novel.
But like that is a good anchoring point. Like the humaniform robots in Robots of Dawn, both the game and the book, are very clearly what Star Trek Next Generation calls, the Soong type android, the Commander Data type, in that they are
no accident.
And they even use the term positronic brain and so forth. So yes, these characters that we meet, Daniil, who does appear in both the book and the game rather, and acts as our assistant. He is this humaniform robot. There was a robot named Jander. I had this written down, and the audiobook has two different narrators, so the pronunciation of certain characters changed a little bit. At first, I thought somebody was saying gender. Yes, Jander's room exists in Gladia's house, but there's no mention of him being her robot husband, because yes, that is a plot point. She did not discover the joys of love and sex until she started getting it on with robot Jander. So he gets brain melted, and there's the who did what to whom. But Jander only appears in one of the many empty rooms in this game, and Giscard We'll just skip to the end. There's a spoiler for the book here. Giscard is this kind of one step below, a perfect replicant type robot. And Giscard turns out to be, in the book, the one who did the mind warping. But Giscard doesn't, and so is either the most significant or the most interesting character, depending on how much you enjoy Isaac Asimov's writing. But he's certainly the most significant in that he's the one that made the plot go. But he doesn't appear in this game at all.
So my contention with this, as regards this game is, it is a sequel to Robots of Dawn, and
Robots of Dawn. Oh, the game is a sequel.
So this game called Robots of Dawn, to my mind, it can be seen as a sequel to Robots of Dawn.
I get what you're saying.
There is nothing in it that contradicts that, and it makes more sense in that regard. So yeah,
I want to come in on the sex thing, and do a little bit of a devil's advocate on it, because I feel that there's no one here to defend Isaac Asimov on it. And while I find the sex stuff quite over the top and quite unnecessary, he was trying to make the point that human society has evolved beyond the nasty squalor that we have on the earth. And in fact, he alludes to the nasty squalor we have on the earth. And he says that he tries to make it sound as if the spacer worlds, which have a controlled population where everyone is essentially, everyone is an aristocrat. Everyone has their own Victorian manor house, their own Edwardian manor house, and they have evolved beyond the normal desires and needs that we have, to the point where food is not just for sustenance, food is for enjoyment. For us, and for them, sex is no longer for recreation. For reproduction, sex is for recreation. And that's the point he's trying to make, but it comes off as sleazy and creepy and nasty. And it's something I came across recently as well in another book I read. I should have read a long time ago, Ringworld. And that was present in that book as well. Exactly the same thoughts that I had about the sex in this book, I had about Larry Niven's kind of attitudes towards it there. And I thought, I felt dirty.
I think it's like I was saying. I think this is all a bit of a product of its time.
It must have been.
There's an awful lot of stuff that was happening in the early 80s, where it had kind of gone through. There'd been the sort of 1960s liberation of everybody. We'd had the 1970s where everyone had kind of sort of taken it to its logical conclusion. By the 80s, I think it was cresting. With all of these sorts of trends we see, they're necessary. They come through. Then they always overtop. They always go slightly too far, and then they're reined in by society. And I think by the early 1980s, I think that kind of tendency in society was overtopping. And so a lot of the stuff from that kind of era, I think it tends to come across now as being, like you say, it comes across as sleazy. And I think if you had read it at the time, certain people might have been horrified by it, and others might have just thought, well, this is the way, this is society now.
Asimov was the key thing to what Asimov was doing in almost all of his books is predicting what future society would be like.
Yeah.
So perhaps he was saying we've gone from the 50s of the nuclear family to free love in the 60s, and the inevitable conclusion of that will be where sex is, the procreation part of sex and the sexually transmitted diseases and so on are entirely irrelevant, and people just do it for fun.
Yeah. Another way I read this was in the light of Foundation and Earth, which has got, I don't think he's making a point in there. I mean, he just puts in, there are lots of female characters that are in there so that Golan Trevize can do his Zap Brannigan across the galaxy. And they don't seem to have any philosophical point. So when I read that stuff, I mean, I think my first thought was, this must have been written around the same time as Foundation and Earth. I checked Foundation and Earth, and it was the same. It was within 3 years of each other. Yeah. I absolutely, I completely agree with you about the what the point he was trying to make in this book. Yeah, it genuinely. I was reading it, and I texted. We are on our internal Discord. I texted Jason, and sort of said, I think my words were literally. So I think you got a running commentary as I made it through the few pages where it went from 0 to 60, and it ended with me saying this book ought to be impounded.
Yeah, I will never forget that turn of phrase. So to kind of cap this off, because to take us away from the Asimov book review, to Dave's point, I do think that, at least in Robots of Dawn, the novel, yes, there's a little bit more than just, hey, ladies, this is how it ought to be, because he does also show some of the hypocrisy, some of the, it doesn't quite necessarily work out that way. People falling in love that, or being feeling hurt and rejected when technically they're not supposed to. So I think, yes, I think the treatment in the book, although it's stark in some ways, I think he is showing that although we can quibble with just how much we would believe that these monocultures, could really exist. This is the planet of free love. This is the planet of frigid people. But
it's important to say, I guess he's saying, here's Earth, where we have our Earth sensibilities, and we have, is it Solaris, the other planet, Solaris, where they are
frigid,
abhorrent about human contact, and then we have
is the free love.
Yeah,
it's drained of all meaning, I think, was one of the ways they describe it.
But so to the point, and to flow from the plot of the novel to the plot of the game, the plot of the novel revolves around, this robot has been, destroyed. There's sort of plot points around, do we even call this murder or roboticide? That's a running thread. And ultimately, one of the main threads to look at is, was this about jealousy? Was this about the outsider behavior of, they say, like, well, you can use a robot for sex, but a husband, no. So you said, okay, was that what it was? Were people saying we can't have this? Ultimately, it's not that. It turns out to be this sort of political MacGuffin, but it could have been. Like, it's the most plausible theory for a while, that is in fact somehow either motivated by jealousy or disgust, that's why this robot Jander was destroyed. Now the game does not take that track. Neither the robot Jander nor the robot Giscard appear. Instead, the plot is that Dr. Fastolf, who was the lead suspect in the destruction of Jander, the plot is that he has been killed, and it turns out he's been killed by a poison gas dart that hit him while your robot pal Daniil was with him. Something that shouldn't have even happened. There's some implication that maybe Daniil is under suspicion, but he doesn't seem to be impeded in any way. So you, Elijah Bailey, end up in Fastolf's home with the premise that you are there to solve this murder mystery, which does line up with the book in that Elijah was brought in to try to clear Fastolf's name. In this case, you've been brought in to solve the killing of Fastolf. So there are these four primary suspects, and this is a point that I'm very interested to hear from you guys, because you both played the Apple version. It's supposed to be that the killer is randomized in each game. However, in Kim Schuett's Book of Adventure Games 2, he makes clear that he played it 25 times and only ever got Amadiro as the killer. Did you guys get Amadiro?
I don't know, because I played this game lots and I didn't get to the point where I could finish it, but I did end up watching a walkthrough.
Which does have Amadiro, and it's an Apple, right? The Apple Adventures one has Amadiro. Ben?
Okay, so I played it to the end, and I'm clearly not very clever, because I was convinced that it was Gremionis that did it.
Yeah.
And so I went through all of the motions of showing the director, or the chairman, whatever his name is,
the chairman,
all of the things that were needed for me to prove Gremionis. And when I realized that it hadn't done anything, I went through the motions of starting to show him all of the things to prove that it was definitely Vasilia, because that was my next on my list. After I did that, I then moved on to trying to prove it was actually what's his face?
Amadiro, yeah.
Amadiro, and halfway through that, it times you out. So you can only give so much exposition, and then the director says, "You've wasted all my time. What a load of rubbish. Go home." And he sends you home, and you lose. And at that point, I said, "Stuff it. I've had enough of this game. It was great fun, but I think I get the gist." And now I'll go and review it.
Yeah, I should say, just to be clear, I did reach the end. When I say I didn't get the end, I don't mean I didn't get to the end and win the game. Yeah. You get to the end whether you like it or not. Yes. It's the game is set up with a timer, and you go through the day, and you go to, when you get too tired, you will fall asleep. And when you wake up, the chairman is waiting for you, and you have to give the chairman your evidence. You have to present your evidence to him in order to prove what you think happened. And then I don't know if we'll talk about the twist or not. I don't know if it's fair to go to that level.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Right. Okay. That's fine. But yeah, I got as far as that, but I didn't have enough evidence to do it, nor was I sure who did it. And I'm not entirely sure, having watched the walkthrough, if I was sure who did it, having watched the walkthrough.
Okay. I was a little confused, because you if you go to the hyper viewer, the screen, the hyper screen, whatever it's called, and you TV, look at the hyper screen. Sorry, Jason, say again.
I said the TV, the telly, yes.
The telly thing, and you watch it and you wait for the channel to change, and then when the channel changes, it says, "Newsflash: Elijah, whatever his face is called, is here to solve a murder. So far, this is where he's at."
Yeah.
And I did the whole thing. I went through all of the motions, did everything I thought was necessary, checked a walkthrough to see whether I had. And having done that, I thought, yes, I've done everything necessary. I checked the hyper screen, or whatever it's called, and it said I was beginning to build a case against two of them.
Yeah.
So... And at that point, I thought, that sounds a bit dodgy. I went to bed anyway, got up thinking that I knew it, because, and I didn't, and I failed.
Okay.
Jason, how about you?
Well, so we'll come back to the solution then, because I want to talk about some of the mechanics of the game. So this is a pure text adventure, screen full of text. On the Apple, looks like there's both a 40 and an 80 column mode, but because it's the Apple, it's just monochromatic text. On the Commodore 64, you get colored text that actually I thought worked pretty well. Different characters have different color text. This is from that awkward period where they still weren't very good at getting screenshots off a CRT, and some art directors would say, "I'm just going to mock up the text screen; it'll look better." And it always just looked fake and weird. And this game box has that going for it. But yeah, pure text. The parser, I will say, actually, before I do parser, let's do box. So we talked about Souls of Darkon, extremely minimalist. This game, since it is fundamentally a murder mystery, and it has a good amount of world building in it. There's the telegram summoning you to solve the mystery. There's the letter from your supervisor saying, "Well, you're probably going to fail, but do your best." There are little dossier cards on each of the suspects with biographical information and pseudo handwritten notes. I did remark that on one of the handwritten notes there are like two two syntax errors. There's an apostrophe that shouldn't be there, and there's a misspelling. So somebody
I'm sure it's done intentionally.
Oh, you think so? to show Elijah Bailey's shortcomings.
Yeah.
So yeah, like quite a bit of world building in there. We mentioned the 64 and the Apple release. What I didn't say at the time, on 64, it was released on both disc and tape, which isn't completely unheard of, but is a little unusual from an American company. There's an Australian release that's been captured online. That's the tape version. And this is intriguing to me because the Apple II version, and you can tell from the Apple Adventures playthrough that we talked about, that's hitting the disc. It's unusual to have a game that's memory resident on the 64, but is hitting the disc on the Apple. That surprised me.
I know the Apple II originally released with, I think, less memory than the later configurations of the Apple IIc had more. But yeah, I was surprised and somewhat doubtful at the cassette release, and I meant to go back and find out, did it really have a cassette release? Because I couldn't find reference to it on Moby Games. And the constant disc access on the Apple II version made me wonder, is that actually true? And was it?
Mokeg has an image. It's a picture of the tape. Like I could not find a tape image out there, but I think it's absolutely legit. And the game is definitely memory resident from the disc version on the 64. It loads the title screen, it loads the game, and just plays from there. So it comes with enough instruction, I would say, to kind of give you the sense for this is how this game is going to work. Like it establishes your main function is going to be walking around and asking character X, did character Y have means, motive, or opportunity? So it did set that expectation and kind of hinted that you're going to want Daniil to help you replay those later, which, as you said, occurs when the chairman shows up in the living room and won't leave satisfied unless you've presented your case.
It did make me feel like I was playing Ultima again. In terms of with Ultima, you go around, you say name, job to everyone, and you go around to everyone in this game, you say motivation.
Did Gremionis have means?
Do they have means? Do they have the opportunity? Yeah, and you do, essentially you are asking the characters, did they have the means and opportunity to try and piece that together? The tone, something you should go back to, but we've said very little about the book other than the salacious stuff. The book, the characters in the book all have quite a hostile tone to them. They don't want to be interviewed. They don't want to help. And that does come across, I think, they do get the tone correct in this text adventure the same way.
I thought exactly the same thing. Exactly the same comment here in my notes. Vasilia in particular, they got her down to a T in the text adventure, just like in the books.
Yeah, which I think is hard to do.
Yeah, it is, and it was really impressive. So.
But Ben, what about Gladia? In the book, there's a very tender love scene between Elijah and Gladia.
There is,
and I must say, when I attempted to do the solemn duty of a retro adventurer, and I tried to kiss Gladia, and I was told I don't know the word kiss.
Oh,
that hurt me, and I assume that it hurt you as well, Ben.
And I'm sure it hurt Isaac Asimov as well.
Because she's and the thing is, like, she's written to be flirty, when she shows her, she's like, "Oh, come on in, and he asks questions." Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the from what I get from the novel, having not read the ones before it, or at least not that I can remember, I may have rented them from the library, borrowed them from the library as a child, and probably not got too far into them because they're quite the whole book's an argument with other people. I get the impression he's supposed to be a loving husband, but also tempted by this.
Let me ruin the book for you, Dave. This is I've got a note here. It says the book was a combination of robot husbands, unorthodox family relations, and casual philandering. Put it that way. Yes, he's supposed to be a loving husband. Yeah, he is. He's supposed to be a loving husband.
Yeah. Although his wife
both can be true.
His wife is not keen on leaving Earth, and he's desperate to leave Earth. This is the political side of things, is that Earth is this massively overpopulated bin of a place where the spacer worlds are these paradises, and the spacer worlds say, no, you stay on Earth. You don't go and spread your disease on the universe.
Yes.
And this is a point in which Asimov's overall stories will no doubt see Earth suddenly start to expand after this, presumably.
Yeah. And you've got in the mythos of the Asimov books, what happens is there's this wave of spacers, the first people to go out and colonize the first few planets. And then if you read, this is why the Foundation books and the later robot books have to be kind of taken together, because you then have this kind of crisis point where we don't know whether there's going to be any more colonization. And then what actually happens, and you see this in the Foundation books, is that there's this second wave from Earth, which ends up colonizing the whole galaxy and becoming the Galactic Empire.
That was fairly obvious it was going to happen from this novel. The space of worlds where the kind of aristocracy holding the poverty on Earth but behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's brilliant stuff. I started from the Foundation books, so
those are the ones I've read that I can remember reading.
Yeah,
the Foundation ones. I didn't. The robot side of things in the 80s. In the 80s, there was this trope of, and I think in the 70s as well, but I remember in the 80s of these robots in science fiction, and you had to present them with a quandary that they couldn't resolve their way out of. Does not compute. Fizz, boom.
Exactly.
Good guys win.
Captain Kirk talking the computer to death. Yes.
Yeah. And that happened. That seems to come from Asimov, and it's present in his books here. I mean, it's present in this novel. The whole idea, the whole premise that they're going about just now was it who was capable of causing this robot to go into this terminal loop of being unable to decide and exploding and it being dismissed. But it's something that I got far too much of in the 80s, or by the 80s I had too much of, and I wouldn't want to see any more. And the whole robot thing doesn't appeal to me quite so much as the Foundation side of things.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too torn back into the novel, but yes, Asimov's infamous 3 laws of robot guidance.
Famous, surely. Famous.
Yes. Yeah, but he sort of ties himself in knots. Like, well, if you asked a robot for a snack and he couldn't provide it, well, that would be a violation of the first law. There's a lot of these weird, he's trying to explain these things that he laid out 30 years before. Now that they need to bear more scrutiny, and it's not going well. But they don't play a huge role in the game. When Daniil is under suspicion, there's a talk of it would be pretty difficult for him to violate those laws. It otherwise doesn't play a huge role, again, because those other robot characters have been taken out of the game. From the parser experience itself, like I said, there's not too much instruction given. You can hit help in game, and it gives you kind of basic, here's how you navigate. How did you guys feel about things like the world description, available verbs, things like that?
I wanted more description, and now I understand why it's not there. If this was a single tape load on the C64, I had the impression it was a full disk full of potential descriptions that they hadn't used to the best of their ability. If it's a single tape load, I understand why that's not the case. I wanted more description.
For the parser, I'll give it this. It was solid, at least.
Yeah,
it was a solid parser. It wasn't flaky. It wasn't overly complicated. I didn't sort of investigate it in a kind of diagnostic sense, but you get a feel for these games, don't you? Where you play a few of them, you get a feel, and it felt solid to me, but not complicated, not overcomplicated, which makes sense given the era.
Yeah. Well, so what I'll say, Dave, to your point, it was single load, but we talked about text compression earlier. The text is not compressed in memory in this game. So one of the trade-offs is it's fast. Even the more complicated commands, they process quickly, but all that text is stored, out in the open. So there, a dedicated, programmer could easily have fit quite a bit more in memory if they had wanted to. So,
and yet these people hadn't done a text adventure before, had they?
No, there's no evidence that they had before or since. But the methods would have been understood by then if one had wanted to. And a lot of things are under-described. There are a lot of offices that are described as being interesting or not very interesting or almost interesting. A lot of empty space. Ben, the other necessary Ben Collier department, how did you feel about the depiction of the necessaries, or as they are in Asimov parlance, the personals?
Okay, so for the listener, your a personal is essentially the same thing as the French word privé, or privy. Is it a French word? I don't know, it's probably Norman French.
Yeah, there's always a thing in science fiction where they have to rename things.
Yeah, the personal. So you're and there's a wonderful scene in the book, and I'm ruining this for everyone. There's a wonderful scene in the book where Fastolf, who of course is dead in this, which I'm going to refer to as a sequel, so I can kind of canonize it, is where Fastolf he treats everything as a subject. In fact, they say about Vasilia that he was interested in her only as a subject of study, and he treats Elijah the same way, and he sends him into the privy or the personal, because they've got this extra technology. What he does
privy is that what you call it in your house?
Oh, absolutely, yes, the privy, and he sends him into the lab. We call it that too.
The bog.
The lab, yeah. The loo. That's the loo. I was, yeah. I asked somebody in London if I could go to the loo earlier, and they didn't know what I was talking about. He sends him into the toilet conversation. We like toilets on this podcast, so I'm labouring it. So he sends him into the personal, and of course, because he's from Earth, where everything is terribly, terribly cramped, he gets this enormous kind of agoraphobia every time he goes anywhere that's got outsideness, and he's sent into the personal, and Fastolf has set the whatever it is, the hollow settings to make it feel as though he's in the middle of a big field that's wide open.
Holodeck.
Yeah, yep. So, like the holodeck, there you go. It's the next generation stealing from Asimov again. And he has this kind of crisis. What's interesting is, and this is my contention as to why this is a sequel, when he goes outside in the text adventure, you get nothing saying he's experiencing agoraphobia.
You didn't use the cable cars then. That's also a very long shaggy dog story that you told. Ben, all I wanted to know is if you type use conveniences and if you were satisfied by the result you got.
Oh, you're going
on this long holodeck journey.
There's a little soupçon of a joke there. Little amuse-bouche. Yeah. So you say. Are you talking about if you take a shower?
You can take a shower, but you can also use conveniences. And if you didn't, who are you, and what have you done with Ben Collier?
I didn't. I took a shower, but I didn't use the lab.
I had a shave.
What happened?
Yeah, you have a shower, you have a shave, and if you use
come on, what happens if you
conveniences,
use loo?
I'm telling you. And this kind of is a callback now to Souls of Darkon. It says, to my disappointment, what? You were expecting some tacky remark like in other text adventures? Question. Yeah. And to that I say, yes. Commit to the bit, and B, bro, you put conveniences in this game. You put a zillion toilets in this game. Don't chide me for then. And I had the same complaint about behind closed doors, where it's like, oh, I knew somebody would do it. Like, dude, you made a toilet game. Same thing I say to Jon Leupp here. You put all of these personals in the game. You told me the conveniences were there. Don't chide me for using them.
You know what, Jason? I want to do a backport of this game. And I want to make a version of this game where when you go into the personal, you discover that someone has locked it from the outside. You find yourself stuck
Elijah
on the loo.
Bailey behind closed doors. I like it. I'll get behind that. No pun intended.
The agoraphobia does come into it if you try and leave the house without suitable protection.
If you stay outside, you
have an incident.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And there's a cable car. So there's this airfoil that you can get in, and the robot will take you to different places. And then for reasons that I don't fully understand, there's also a cable car system. I think it would be a way to get past a puzzle, I think. But if you ride on the cable cars, you have to wait. If you get to a destination, there's like a library and a diner, all these places that you can't enter. Again, more empty space in the game. But if you wait too long for a cable car without getting in, you have a breakdown, and Daniil has to drag you back home.
How interesting.
So the agoraphobia is still in the game.
It's interesting. Do you know what? I've got a theory. My theory is the game's not finished.
I think Epyx perhaps said, let's spend some money on making a text adventure shell. We'll see how well it does, And if it does well, we will have a new line of games to take on Infocom. And what you got in the box must have been designed earlier on in the process, because what you got in the box is on. I've not physically seen it online, but it seems to me on a par with what you got with Infocom games in terms of the feelies and the browsies.
Yeah. I think the premise that yes, it was, let's give it an honest shot. Like you say, we'll put an Infocom style presentation in the packaging. Unfinished. I feel like
I've got an even deeper conspiracy theory.
Okay, go on.
I think what happened is they started writing it.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were writing it for the American market, and then halfway through the development process, one of the directors of the company came to the person who was writing it and said, "We discovered there's a huge market on the other side of the Atlantic. You're going to have to do it for tape as well." And they had to remove a whole load of the locations and make them inaccessible, and remove a whole load of the possible people who could have done it, simplify the game, and that's what made it onto tape.
There are a lot of locations in this game compared to, if you look at an Infocom game, there's a podcast which I'm sure you're aware of, Eaten by a Gru.
Never heard of it.
No, don't know who they are.
Yeah, and they mention the number of rooms in an Infocom game, and this game is approaching an Infocom level of rooms, even though it is a tape load game. So that holds water, what you're saying, Ben, because they had all these rooms, and there's not much going on in these rooms. These rooms are empty corridors and empty descriptions, and did they have to truncate all the descriptions to make it fit on tape? Because they were planning to bring it across to the BBC and the Spectrum and the Amstrad.
I wonder if I wonder if also maybe you had an inexperienced programmer working on it, possibly. It's interesting. I mean, Jason has a thing about games that sort of announce the number of rooms that they have. You almost if they say, "Well, it's a wonderful game with 200 rooms," you almost for certain that they're all going to be empty.
Yeah.
Because after Infocom, it became a bit of a big deal to sort of talk about how many rooms you had. But I don't know. Interesting.
I don't think... I understand what you're laying out there, Ben. I don't think that's what happened, and there's a lot of reasons that I don't. We can branch off into the Isaac Asimov and Epyx conspiracy podcast to go over that. I don't think it got truncated to shift to another market. I can definitely believe the idea that Epyx and Jon Leupp were like, yeah, we have X number of months to spend on this. We've got this other stuff that we need to work on, and we're not going to implement the rest of this. Yeah. As a mystery game goes, and we just did the Sherlock Adventures, and it's interesting. Like we haven't done Infocom Adventures yet, but if you go back to Melbourne House Sherlock, apart from the fact that the game will crash on the Commodore 64, like that game, it takes a lot of effort to go through the game. Like there's a lot of moving parts and investigatory steps and so on and so forth. Robots of Dawn, because of the way that like you said, the sort of realistically hostile interviewees are implemented, and even Gladia, who is, she's inclined to be a little snuggly towards you. Eventually, she says, I feel like I've answered enough questions for now. And then the chairman will show up later, and you have to solve the game. So there's the optimization steps of which things do I need to ask the characters about so that I can get to the core of what's going to solve this game. There's also a mechanic that the final walkthrough makes clear, like there's a physical piece of evidence. So there's 1 of 4 physical pieces of evidence. The other 3 won't exist in the game if the culprit is associated with him. Yeah,
depending on which one done it there, because it's the randomization that may exist on the Commodore 64, but does not necessarily exist in the Apple II port.
Like that stuff. Although there were apparently some buggy outcomes you can get to, but overall that seems to work. But where I was going with this, with the Sherlock tie-in was when you know the critical path, like the good walkthrough that's out there, it's pretty quick to whip through. That the Apple Adventures solution is under 20 minutes. It's easy to whip through, unlike Sherlock, which is still a slog to go through. Another bow, I would say, because it's those 6 different mysteries, that game took a little while. So, it's like an Infocom adventure in that way, in that once you know the steps, it's pretty quick to go through, which ties in with my two playthroughs of this game, because knowing about the seeming lack of randomization on the Apple, my first play that I was able to complete, I had to restart a few times for different reasons, but the first one I was able to complete, Amadiro was the killer. And I'm like, oh no.
There we go.
So quickly before we recorded today, I was able to whip through another one. I did my best, like, all right, I'll load it at a different time, try to at least encourage it to be more random. And I did, in fact, get Vasilia for that one. So,
you're joking.
Yeah, so it is
How
random on 64. I did get a different outcome.
I think we should probably.
I'm sorry, it was Gladia. I'm sorry, it was Gladia. I thought it was. I thought it was going towards Vasilia, but it was Gladia. I'm sorry.
The way the game works is you have to collect evidence as you go along, and they've taken a brave decision to not be a puzzle-solving text adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There aren't any puzzles. You need to there are a few. You need to set yourself up to do it correctly. You need to get the recorder and get used to using it. But and there are some pieces you need to pick up. But fundamentally, you're not looking to, how do I get past this area? How do I get past this guardian? How do I do this? That's all taken out. They've taken the brave decision that you're there almost as a spectator going through this set time to work out what's happened, although I will say there's nothing going on like there is in some of the Infocom games and The Hobbit, etc., where other characters are doing things. As far as I can determine, nothing happens until you make it happen.
There wasn't any of that. I'm with you, I'm with you on this. You said earlier that it reminded you of, was it Ultima?
Just briefly going around job name.
Yeah, it reminded me, actually, of Sleuth, which was a very early 80s DOS game where you had a visual representation of a little man's head, and you had to travel around this mansion asking people who they were with, what their alibi was, and you had to look for the murder weapon. And it remarkably, for a game of a very different sort of interface, it was awfully similar to Sleuth. It was this kind of almost formulaic, go to each person, ask them for their, check on whether the person had means, check on whether the person had, opportunity.
Yeah. That's the bulk of the game, which is a little bit disappointing in terms of that. But I don't believe you could have done the level of discourse and catching people out with clever philosophical traps that the book tries to do. So how could they have done it differently?
Absolutely. So we've covered this in some detail. I was very pleased with the festivities that you see on the screen at one point. Do you spot that?
I saw a soccer game.
You saw a soccer game?
Yeah.
I watched Turn on the TV, and it was the Asimov Day Parade.
Oh, I missed that.
Asimov Day Parade. Isn't that lovely? The Asimov Day Parade. I think we should have an Asimov Day. I agree with that. We should all make all those sorts of have all sorts of exciting stuff going on.
We talked about the emptiness. There's a lot of items that don't do a whole lot, including that they start you with a blaster that you can't blast anything with. You can't shoot anything. If you ask Daniil, he's like, "Well, yes, it's they wouldn't have let you here with a charged weapon." I'm like, well, okay, but why did we do this then?
Because the game's been curtailed.
But the
feeds
book
into my conspiracy theory.
It's not like Elijah Bailey runs around the book, blasting things left and right.
But is it like a cop's badge? Is that what they're trying to say with it? Is it like
the vibe of the book?
The uniform? Because he's no, it doesn't sit, does it?
It's odd. If you follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky, and if you don't already, please do. You may have noticed in the run up to this, I posted my least favorite room from this game, the ultrasonic brain dissolving chamber.
Ah, the brain dissolver. I did wonder. It seemed a little bit out of.
That also not appearing in the book. I don't believe.
No, definitely not in the. I don't remember an ultrasonic brain dissolver.
Yeah, so
that's for sure.
Jon Leupp decided
you wouldn't if you'd been to it.
Oh, the other room description that I put down. This is in Fastolf's house. There's like dining rooms and breakfast rooms and all these sort of semi-redundant rooms. In the breakfast room at Fastolf's house, it's described. The breakfast room appears to be a well-lit grotto. grotto is one of those words from 80s text adventures. I don't know how many grottos or grotto-like things, and I don't know why these guys were so fixated on describing things as grottos, but it was just part of the international culture. Like we know that these authors came from all sorts of different, some were MIT engineering students, some were, humble, English teenagers. They're all interested in grottos, and I don't understand why.
I don't get it. Oh, the strangest. This is completely out of left field. The strangest thing. I remember reading about I remember this peculiar organization in the 1980s in the US called the Church of Satan. And I remember the Church of Satan would organize themselves. Their local organizations were referred to as grottos. I thought it was hilarious because it just put me in mind of Santa Claus. I've got absolutely no idea where the whole. It's a word that seems to be. It's lost all of its impact. I mean, it just conjures up elves in like Tinkerbell.
Was it Santa's grotto in the 80s, or did that start being? Did Santa's grotto take over the use of the word grotto? Did grotto mean something
from the
else?
Satanists.
Yeah, well, not necessarily the Satanists, but from all the lazy descriptions of things.
Well, I mean, where does it? Well, there you are. If you happen to be a sort of etymologist, come sort of social observer or something, and you happen to be a listener to this podcast, please get in touch and let us know how the usage of the word grotto.
Contact at retroadventurers.com. Yes,
yes, please.
Your thoughts on Asimov's take on female self-pleasure, societal organization, and grottos. We are open to all comers. Yeah. We'd alluded to there being the twist ending. It seems like you guys at least have seen the end.
I didn't get there. Didn't get there.
Well, I did.
Okay.
Ooh.
So, having played the game through a couple times, I'm not sure how I was meant to get to the correct answer to that, other than because the thing is, you lay out the case to the chairman, and if he accepts the case, he's like, "All right, well, are you saying that so and so killed Dr. Fastolf?" And Dave, do you want to take it from there?
And the correct answer, this is a big spoiler here. The correct answer is no.
Ooh.
And then, who should enter the room? Go on, Ben, guess.
Dr. Falstaff himself.
Dr. Fastolf.
Yes! Excellent.
And how nothing that I saw and read, and this is me watching it on YouTube. This is me watching a solution on YouTube because I didn't get there in my own steam. Nothing that I'd read up to that point told me any indication that Dr. Fastolf had not been killed, and in fact it was a perfect humaniform replica of him that had been killed when someone was trying to assassinate or kidnap or whatever, because this political spacers versus Earth people thing. But yeah, I don't know that. I don't know if it was foreshadowed there, or if this was just a thing you were supposed to get wrong the first time and then get right the second time. I don't know.
Yeah, because if you say yes, then whatever it's tailored to the person that you've named. But it's like, well, they seemed an all right person, and you feel sort of bad for them, and you feel like maybe there's just something that you missed. Do you want to play again? Now I want to find it because I took. Yes, I found it. There's an in-game clue, or it may just be sloppy writing, or it may be a clue that doesn't completely play out. Because if you ask Daniil about Fastolf's death, he does answer, in the way that you would think would be accurate to, yes, I think that Dr. Fastolf was actually walking next to me and then got killed. But I took the screenshot. If you do to Daniil, tell me about Daniil. Here's what he says. I am the only humaniform robot in existence. I was created by Dr. Han Fastolf and designed by the late Dr. Raj Nemanu Sartan. My physical appearance is identical to Dr. Sartan's. So that jumped out at you. Yes.
Oh. Identical to his creator, not unlike Data from Star Trek.
That too. But note that it says the late Dr. Sartan, but just says Dr.
Not the late Dr. Fastolf. Yeah.
And so I clocked that. Once I knew the trick, and then I was going through the game another time to try to get more information, try to pull things out, and I'm like, ooh, I'm screenshotting this and discussing it.
You would dismiss that though by saying that the game is telling you that the other guy is dead because you don't know that the other guy is dead,
and
but you know
that
Dr.
also makes perfect sense. Yes,
yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be that, but from the thread of was that something that he'd played around with the idea of, and it just didn't show up. Other things. Yes, I did take a screenshot of Kiss Gladia. I don't know the word kiss. I was also disappointed that, unlike Asimov, the game doesn't choose to tell us that Vasilia's breasts are larger than Gladia's. I was really looking forward to that.
Yeah. You see, no, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, defend him all you like. I mean, it's pretty pervy.
I'm not.
It's exactly the same as Foundation and Earth. And there's plenty of stuff in there.
And there's Ring World as well. The same. I'm in two minds, because on the one hand, if I see someone and their breasts are large and it's obvious, I notice it.
You notice it.
And I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't comment on it. I wouldn't write it down. But for some reason, when it's in a book, I find it a bit nasty, a bit cheap.
I don't mind the noticing. It was just I get, let me just say that I don't particularly enjoy reading Isaac Asimov. That was one of the reasons that I went to the audiobook. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to make it through this sitting down and trying to read it, because it's been a long time since I tried to read an Asimov novel. And so you can always say, like, well, maybe it's the narrator, but Asimov's style, it just kind of plods on and on and on. The Robots of Dawn has lots of long, arguments that are attempting to be, logical and this and that. I'm not the only person who's experienced the book to then say there's exactly one event that happens, and it's Elijah Bailey, having a breakdown outside in a rainstorm because of his agoraphobia. Everything else is just sitting in rooms talking. So when those little things come up, like, well, and here's Vasilia, and her breasts were larger. And I'm like, well, okay, sure.
I genuinely love Isaac Asimov. I can credit him with bits of logic and ideas that can genuinely change my life. Also, when I was reading it as a 14-year-old boy, I appreciated some of the elements that we're talking about.
Right.
I think, I mean, these days you'd have issues, wouldn't you? Because people might point out that you're not appealing necessarily to a wide audience by doing that.
I mean, the whole thing in sci-fi, there's always sort of something for the dads.
Yes,
and the idea is you put something on screen that the dads are quite happy to see, and it's I don't know. I mean, I would be unfair to him here because everyone was doing it, but certainly when I come across that in the book, I would be happier were it not there.
Well, John,
it's funny.
John didn't. Oh, go ahead.
I'm coming across perhaps as a little bit more puritanical than I might like to, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's actually something quite charming about the sort of quite bold-faced sort of almost sort of, the same sort of thing as a carry-on humor, really. I think it's charming as well in a way.
Yeah, and I do want to earnestly follow up, actually, from the very beginning, Ben, when you said, would you choose this book as something to write a game and sell it to children? Remember that the U.S. market, especially in the early part of the 80s, like this is what you Brits would call the full price market. It's really not, especially like text adventures, they're not tailored to kids.
No, you're right.
So don't take that as the view on it.
No.
And so the other kind of quirky thing about the game, I'd read about this in some of the docs online. I had to see it for myself. If you get the prompt at the end, do you want to play again? And you answer no, it says, are you sure? And if you answer yes, it says, are you really sure? And it will just keep repeating reallys, I guess, until it overflows 255 and then just starts over again.
Blows the buffer.
Yeah.
I noticed, Jason, you got to about 15 reallys.
I filled the screen, yeah.
And then Nick posted a picture of the Spice Girls. So maybe we should have a really off and see if we can really overflow the buffer.
The three of us, Nick and Dave, dressed as the canonical Spice Girls.
That's brilliant, fantastic, lovely. Right, well, on that note, gents, would you play it again? I would.
I might do. I might feel the notion to play it again on the C64 rather than the Apple, based on what we've learned.
Yeah.
I thought I would be playing on the Apple and I'd be the only one playing the Apple because Jason thought you would play it on the C64.
I'm shocked that you played the Apple version, Ben. I'm shocked.
Genuinely, it was through my own lack of knowledge that I did it, not because I had a particular taste for apples.
But I think there's a lot to say that's good about this book. There's a lot that's not in the book, sorry, about the novel itself, but there's a lot to say that's good about this game. They did something interesting. They tried to make a text adventure while doing as little of the text adventure tropes that normally exist. So if you want to see something different from Souls of Darkon, from the Infocom games, and particularly from the text adventure slop that's out there, then this is something that's quite original in that way.
Yeah, and I definitely would recommend it to others, and I would play it again. And this is a game where, I always bring up the Book of Adventure games, part 1 and 2, when the games that we play are from them. And I'd booted this game up a few times, and it always just kind of seemed daunting, and I hadn't read the book, and I knew I'd have to read the book. So again, thank you, Ben, for giving me this framework to really sit down and have to do all of the steps to play this game. I do want to see the other two solutions. I do want to, Dave talked about it being puzzle light, but there are a couple of things that I didn't get to. There's like cutting open the safe that I wanted to do. I simply didn't have time before the chairman showed up, and I now know how to do it. So I do want to go back and explore a few of those rooms that you can't see what's going on until you can bring a light source to them. Try to go in the back door of the Institute via the cable car, things like that. So it's a flawed game, and I've spent a lot of times talking about how those flaws came to be, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Enjoyed listening to Robots of Dawn more than I thought I would, although, certainly did not prime me for more. But it's a quirky, weird piece of text adventure history, but there's some depth to it.
Yeah. I think a game's better off getting that description than having someone say it is entirely functional and mediocre, and it's just a good text adventure that hits all the things you need to, and it's solvable and all the rest of it. And I'd prefer a game was something very interesting like this than being criticised for being bland.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. No, I think it was a good game, and I'd play it again. It's even on the Apple. Gosh, how about that?
Who is Ben Collier, and what have you done with him?
I don't know.
We're all growing, Ben. We're all growing through this process.
It's growing and changing, day by day. Right, well, I think that probably...
My mouse died for this podcast. I made a fresh cup of tea just before we went into the second half.
Was.
And
ending
one of the cats knocked it over, tipped it right on top of the mouse, and the mouse no longer works, to the point where I don't know how I'm going to end this recording.
Oh my goodness. Well, good luck with that.
If it was an Amiga, I still remember how to do the cursor with the keyboard, but I
could do it in the ST as well.
Yeah.
There'll be a keyboard shortcut for it, or I will find a mouse from elsewhere in the house.
Amazing.
The moose loose about this house.
Right. Well, on that note, gentle listener, I thank you very much for listening on this occasion, and apologize for any psychological damage we may have made in the process of exposing Robots of Dawn to you. Join us next time for more hijinks in the world of text adventures. Thanks ever so much, and it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
And goodbye from Jason.
You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was edited by Nick Moffat and produced by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podcast Addict. Visit us at retroadventurers.com and follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins.
R.I.P. Mouse.